is I just kind of pick a topic to talk about to kind of get us in a space where we can all kind of share and maybe bring to the table something that might be a challenge or an issue. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I have a short PowerPoint that I put together, and I put it together really on the rush. So when I say it's a short PowerPoint, it is a short PowerPoint. So I am going to share what I want to talk about tonight is locating and sourcing deals. So I think that when we are talking about locating and sourcing deals, whether we're on the single family side or the multifamily side, if you're trying to get out of single family into multifamily, it's important to be able to have good systems in place and good processes in place in order to find properties, knowing what kind of properties to buy in and what locations to buy in. I'm going to talk a lot about standards, and if you know me and you know my core intentions and what I like to teach my coaching clients is that standards are really important. That's what we build our business on. That's what we build our portfolios on, and it's how we grow our business into success. Let me give you an example. One of the first, or actually the first multifamily deal I ever bought was an 11-unit building, and everybody on the call's from Chicago. I know, Tony, you're not, but this building was in Zion, north of the city, and it was an 11-unit building. And I took the owner's word for a lot of things. So I took the owner's word for the rents being low and how much improvement I could do to the building and what the market was like. And I didn't do any due diligence. I didn't do any due diligence prior to going to contract, nor after I went to contract and was trying to get funding for the property. And I learned by mistakes, right? And a lot of times that's how we learn, is we learn by trial and error and the things that happen in our life. And the mistakes I made in this first deal were actually, when I look back on it now, were pretty comical. I thought, well, the owner told me that the rents were $75 a month low in the market. And I really didn't do the research on it and found out that the rents were probably $50 too high from where they already were. That's why he couldn't keep tenants. And it was one comical error after another, but it was a great learning experience. And we straightened that deal out. We made some money on it. Our investors made some money on it, and we were able to move on and do something different. And it's just real important to have standards in place. And when I talk about standards, I will talk about things like buying standards, exiting standards, operational standards. It could be everything from the market you're going to buy in, the type of property you're going to buy, to how you're going to run, what your credit checks are going to look like, what your background checks are going to look like, the perfect tenant, and the operations, what you're going to do along the way, the planning and the strategies to increase rents, to improve the property appearance, when you're going to sell it, how you're going to sell it, and at what profit point. This way, as long as you know those things along the way before you get in a deal, it makes things a lot easier. I bought this deal for $53,000 a door, which was clearly overpriced at the time and in the market. But what I learned, the lessons that I learned made me quickly move out of the Chicago market into other markets around the country to buy another 3,900 units in different markets. Location is really important. I remember when I was younger, I had an attraction to hot dog stands, and I would have loved to have bought a hot dog stand. And the philosophy around that is location, location, location. That's how you buy a hot dog stand, because you want it in a location where people are going to come. With an apartment building, a multi-unit building, not as quite important, because you could have an apartment building in the middle of a residential neighborhood or on a main street, and people are still going to come to either one. But location is important. And when I talk about that, I talk about markets. So there's two markets that you can choose from. There's the local market, the market you live in, where you could maybe walk or drive to the property that you own, or a greater market, the market around the outside of your local market. So that could be national, Like I owned a footprint of properties in Dallas, Texas. I had 2,700 units there, another 1,800 units in the Ohio Valley. Because I didn't like the Chicago market, I went to other places. But finding the right properties in the perfect market is one big uh, learning curve. Build a smart and successful strategy around that, developing a comprehensive approach so that it increases your chances for success and it helps you minimize your risk to maximize your return. When I talk about top markets around the country, you want to choose a market. So whether that market is local and what you're looking for in a local market, or whether you want to go national. So I did some investing in my local market and found out that I couldn't really make the money in this market that I wanted to make. So I went to other markets. Like I could buy a product in Dallas, Texas for about $58,000 a door that I could buy in Chicago for about $110,000 a door. The rents were relatively close. I could make more money in Dallas than I could make in Chicago. So you can see what caused me to go to other places. Plus I'm a golfer and I like to golf in a little bit longer in the season. Every year what you'll find is that there's some research companies out there and national brokerage firms. So Reese is real estate investment services. There's another company called Real Analytics. These are firms that do research on top markets around the country. Brokerage firms like Marcus and Millichap or CBRE, large commercial and multifamily apartment and commercial brokers do research and they publish reports. Every year a report gets published that tells you about the top markets. And it seems that year after year, at least 3 of these markets on this list are in the top markets. Your Dallas, your Atlanta, and your San Francisco, every year that I have seen for the last 15 years have been on this national list. But let's talk about what makes apartment market a market to go after. The first thing is typically rent growth. Are we seeing a spike in rent growth? Are we going to see rent growth go up? Are we going to see employment growth go up? How about population growth? Those 3 key indicators are things that you want to look at in a market. What's going on? What's the economic resolve that's happening? Is there an emerging growth in the market? Look at things like what companies are moving into a market. You know, if you go to a building department or you go to the economic development department, you're going to find that they have a 10-year plan, some cases even a 20-year plan about what the future is going to hold. I bought an apartment complex one time in central Indiana in a tertiary market, which is just way out in a cornfield off the beaten track, right? And I bought it because Walmart was building a super Walmart 2 blocks from where the property was. And I knew that they were going to create 3,000 jobs and that it was going to sustain that marketplace. And it was probably one of the better apartment investments that I made that was under 100 units. It really made a lot of sense. So these are things that you want to look at when you're going into a market. Here again, you want to have standards. What are you looking for? What type of population growth do you want to see? Do you want to see population looking like it's going to grow or flat? You know, whatever your choices are. How about rent growth? How much rent growth do you want to see? How about the income in the area? Here's one of the big traps people fall into. You know, if the median income is, call it $50,000 or $60,000 annually, how do you know that the rent after you do a repair on a building will substantiate the median income? Do the research to find out if the income's going up or if businesses are moving out of the area or what the situation may be at that point. The next thing you want to look at is building relationships. Building relationships is really important. You know, when we go out and we look at properties and we want to build relationships and network with people who can bring properties to us to look at. You know, licensed and unlicensed people in the business have different guidelines that they really need to pay attention to. You know, a licensed broker is allowed to take a commission. They get paid that. If you're dealing with a wholesaler or a bird dog and you're paying them some type of a finder's fee, you know, you want to make sure that those finder's fees are paid legally, that they're able to be on the HUD or the RESPA as a marketing fee of some sort. Because if you start to pay somebody fees in the state of Illinois that are unlicensed people, they could run into problems. You could run into problems. But how do we find deals? You know, there's a lot of people out there that are wholesalers, and wholesalers are great relationships to have, and they have all kinds of strategies for finding deals. I know that there's a couple of wholesalers that I'm dealing with right now. I'm looking specifically for 2 to 4 unit buildings in specific markets around the city that we know we can go in, do a little bit of rehab, and put them back on the market. So you want to build relationships with these people. When I talk to people about networking and team building, it's about building relationships and how effective can that relationship be for you. And also, what I like to see is building a win-win situation, right? I don't want to build just a one-sided relationship, but I want to build one that I can do something for them and they can do something for me. That's what we call a win-win situation. Attorneys are really great people to have relationships with. Probate attorneys, divorce attorneys. You know, a probate attorney will always know when you'll be able to buy properties that are off-market properties. You can typically find them before they go to probate. There's ways to rescue these properties out of probate. Divorce attorneys, you know, I heard a divorce attorney say one time that he was in the business because he started out with one client, but always would have 2 at the end. And, you know, I kind of thought it was comical, but I don't personally believe in it, but it was an interesting comment. And then accountants. These individuals have clients that have real estate. I remember I had an attorney one time who came to me when I was in the brokerage business and said, hey, I have 2 clients that I'm trying to get rid of these properties. And we were able to do creative financing. The owner held the paper on both of these properties, and we did no money down deals just because the owners were in a situation where they needed to get out and wanted to get out of the property. So there's always opportunities like that. But these are people that you'll want to build into your inner circle, right? You want to know them, you want to build relationships with them and be close to them so that they keep you top of mind when something like that comes up. A real estate broker. When I talk about a real estate broker, I don't think that we could only have just one broker. I think what we need to have is we need to have several brokers, maybe a couple in different product classes and a couple in different markets, right? Because what happens is a typical broker will get tired of you know, chasing something that might not happen, or you want to really build into a broker that's going to stay the course for you and really continue to be a strategic player on your team, really. Never settle for just one, you know, let the ones who search for you help you find a good fit, develop a plan, and, you know, get them to buy into your plan for the type of property you want and how to find it. They need to spend time daily searching for you. Sometimes they may need to search hundreds of properties when you start buying properties, so that you can pick the best ones and be really serious about it. So brokers are key relationships because they refer you to other relationships as well and other investors as well. Ways to source property. So you might build a little website for yourself, a little static website that sellers might come to. There's social media. There's so much activity on social media today, and the opportunity to buy properties from people who are trying to sell properties on social media. I was on a group investor site this afternoon looking at some different properties, and there must have been 40 or 50 different small 2 and 4 unit multifamily buildings for sale. And this was in a different market. It was in Cincinnati. But what I'm saying is there are plenty of different opportunities out there. There's foreclosures, there's distressed properties. You can go to groups and associations. So if we were to sit down and build a plan for you, I would start to take each one of these and start to just build a specific plan around these, and how do we build campaigns that will give you an endless supply of properties coming to you. You know, if we go to media to look for properties, there's direct mail, there's classified ads, there's bandit signs. I always thought bandit signs were great. And if you don't know what those are, they're the yellow signs with the black printing that you see hanging on the green sign poles on the corner or stuck in the corner at an intersection. I would buy about 500 of these at the beginning of the summer, and I would just put on them, we pay cash for your property, put a 800 number on them going directly to a voicemail, because you don't want to be fielding all these phone calls. You want to listen to the voicemail and then call people back. I'd have a separate company that would go out, and they would stick every Friday night, they would stick these signs in high traffic intersections on the corners by the stoplights right in the ground. And I did it on Friday night because by Monday afternoon, the city would come around and pick the signs up and throw them out, because you're not supposed to do it. But you don't really ever get in trouble for it. It's just they might call you once in a while and give you a hard time. But you continue to put the signs out, and you get a lot of calls. So people call and they tell you, hey, I'm in a divorce, or I have a beat up property, or I had a tenant move out. The ones I liked were the ones that were a landlord. They had a tenant that moved out and they trashed the place. Those are always great opportunities because they're value add, right? You go in, you can fix them up a little bit. Build relationships with banks. If you're at a title company, ask the closing agents who they know. How about auctions, county offices, and tax assessors? Let me talk about the tax assessor for a minute. If you could go to the tax assessor's office and ask the tax assessor, you fill out a Freedom of Information Act, and ask the tax assessor that you want a specific market. So here's what I did. I went to the tax assessor in Kane County, and I said, for the West Dundee Township, which covered part of Elgin, West Dundee, Sleepy Hollow, Gilbert's, I asked for all of the 2 to 4 unit multifamily buildings that were in that market. And I got a list of about 800. It doesn't cost you anything, but now you can implement some type of a marketing system. Typical list will come with an address where the tax bill is being sent, the property address. You can pick up the phone and you can call find a phone number, call the people directly. There's ways to track those phone numbers. And what happens is you'll be surprised at the people who are out of state, out of town, who own a property locally, but they live somewhere else that want to get rid of the property. Or they inherited a property because a parent died or a brother died or a situation like that. So these are great sources to look for. When you do a mail campaign, and I like direct mail because all I have to do is have some envelopes, handwrite some envelopes out, have some letters made. And here's a simple letter, right? I'm interested in purchasing your property at blank street. I can buy your property. I can buy your house as is. You don't have to fix up anything. And I have cash so I can close quickly. Call me to discuss any options. If you mail these to people, here's typically what'll happen. They don't throw them in the garbage. Some do. Most people throw them in the drawer, the junk drawer in the kitchen, because they know at some point, sometime they're going to sell the house, and it might be just around the corner. People's lives change every 30 to 60, 90 days. So I would put those people on that list that you got from the tax assessor's office on a program where every 90 days they were getting a letter from you. Here's another one. Hi, my name is Clay. I'm a certified affordable housing provider here in Indianapolis. I want to buy your property and close on it in less than 30 days. So you put this message out to enough people, somebody's going to buy on it. I know Tony on the call here tonight is an advocate for writing offers. And you don't want to buy everything that comes across your desk. And, I don't want to steal his thunder because he may talk about this, but, Tony would write 100 offers a week in order to buy 2 properties a month. And I think that that's always been a great story because it just shows what do you want to do in order to build your business, whether you're in the single family realm, the small multifamily residential, or the larger multifamily realm. How are you going to approach people? I have a buddy who's a large multifamily owner operator on the West Coast, and he has looked at 700 deals in the last 3.5 years, and they've bought 20. So it's the disparity is there. How much work are you willing to put in for the reward based on your strategy? Here's another quick letter. We buy houses cash. And then the last one that I have is, you know what? I want to buy your property at Madison Street. Please call me. It doesn't have to be fancy. Here's a classified ad in a newspaper or a bandit sign. I buy houses for cash, any condition. And you'll be surprised the people that call. I used to run a classified ad in the display ads in the newspaper, and I would run it every week all year long. It cost me, I want to say it was like $65 a quarter. It was so inexpensive. And people called on it all the time. So I built a very large database of not only investors, but buyers and renters as well. Auctions, tax and county offices, great ways to find properties, sheriff sales, title companies. If you've never been to an auction is worth going to just to investigate. Referrals are huge. You can get referrals. Let the world know that you are in the real estate business, that you're an investor, that you're looking for property. Past clients, people who you've bought property from in the past, or friends of theirs, neighbors to a property. You know what? I would typically buy a property in a neighborhood, and while I had work going on in it, or I'd be waiting for tenants to show up, I'd knock on 5 doors to the north, 5 doors to the south, and 10 doors across the street, trying to see if anybody else was interested in selling, or if they knew anybody who'd want to buy a place in the neighborhood. So a little bit of activity goes a long way when you're trying to build your real estate portfolio. And then your circle of influence. Who else do you know that knows other people? So what I want to do is just kind of open it up for questions right now, if anybody has any questions about any of that. And, I know a couple of guys on the call, regulars. Aaliyah, good to see you tonight. And Carl, you too. And so, people have questions. Go ahead, just unmute yourself and jump in.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, I have a question.
Sure. Hey, Aaliyah.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Mike. I was wondering, I saw in the letters that you say you offer cash, but what do you recommend for small investors like myself who clearly don't have like 60,000 and up?
So that's a great question. So, there's a couple different strategies, right? And let me just say this real quick too. I got your email. I didn't have a chance to respond to it yet, but I'll get back to it later. But a couple strategies for that. Even if you get a mortgage, you're still paying cash, right? So at this point, what you're trying to do is you want to get their attention, and you want to see if they're even interested in selling at this point. I've always been a firm believer. If you've come across a great deal, the money's going to show up. You'll find an investor, a partner, somebody who will show up to maybe, be your financial partner. If you're going and you're networking and you're going to investor groups and RIAs and things like that, and building your network and building, a circle of influence around you, you'll find people with money. If not, and you are a qualified buyer and you can get a mortgage, you're going to be fine. So.
Thanks for answering.
Yeah, I hope that helps.
Hi, I have a similar question.
Okay, Vicky.
So I have a primary, and then I have like a few investment properties in another city.
Okay.
And I did, they are all like condo. I mean, I just buy like condo in downtown area, rent it out to, so I'm a lawyer. So my preferred tenants are like tech people, lawyer, or finance people, like people who work long hours and, don't cook, have
okay.
kids. That's just, I feel I know them, and, it's easy for me to screen them as tenants, whatever. That has been my strategy so far. But I understand, like, I cannot take more than, I would say 10 conventional mortgages. So at some point I need to roll over to those like commercial real estate lenders. And then they would underwrite based on my assets instead of my income.
Okay.
Like I have a W-2. So I guess my question is like, if I'm still doing these like townhomes or small condo, like 1 bed, 2 bed, like it doesn't really make sense to go to commercial lender, right? Like because commercial lender, I would assume they want to deal with at least a couple millions, not like, you know, $500,000 or even less than 1 million. I just don't know like how to make that jump.
Okay. So first thing is I'd be a bad tenant because I like to cook. So I wouldn't be a good tenant for you. But I'm going to let Tony, I'm going to invite Tony to chat for a minute because Tony is a very great example of a portfolio loan. So he's able to package up a bunch of properties that he's had and go to a bank and get one big mortgage, which offsets that residential mortgage piece. So before I let him go, though, I just want to say one thing. I believe real estate, that if we play the game of real estate like you would play the game of Monopoly. Are you familiar with Monopoly?
You mean like the roll the dice and like,
Yeah.
yeah. Uh-huh.
So in Monopoly, what you do is you take and you put 4 houses on Boardwalk, 4 houses on Park Place, and then you cash them in and you put a bigger building down. I'm a proponent of that style, right? So if you have a number of residential properties and you're blocked, my thought process would be, geez, why don't you cash some of those in and buy a bigger building where, you know, if you cashed 4 of those in and you went and bought 2 4 units, now you have double what you cashed in a couple of different buildings. So there's just a strategy behind that you could develop that would make sense. So you either do that by selling them or refinancing or you know, some strategy like that. But I'm going to let Tony explain a little bit about what he did. So.
Am I unmuted, Mike? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're unmuted now, Tony. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so
How you doing?
Good. So what we did was we ran into that barrier. You know, at one time you could each have, you know, 20 mortgages in your name. Then they cut it to 10, then 4, then 2. So what we did was a couple things. Number one is we had a couple lenders that would actually take, for example, 15 houses that we had a regular mortgage. Let's say we had 15 with Countrywide or something. At the time, Countrywide was still around. They would go ahead and do one blanket mortgage for us. So it would then be considered one mortgage. And in most cases, those don't even show up on your credit report. But then after time, we got stuck with, I don't know however many of those. I hit the limit again. So what we found that worked was went to a small community bank, a couple small community banks. And that's really the key. That was really the key to us going past, you know, some number of houses we had. We kept running up against these barriers because of these small community banks. They can pretty much do what they want because it's their own money. Now there were certain guidelines they have to do, but because they hold their own paper, they didn't sell to the secondary market. When I went to the small community bank, I think I had 50 or 60 mortgages on my credit report at the time, and they wrote me another 18. And then at the end of it, they just put it in one mortgage so my payments could be easier. So if you look wherever you're located at for the community bank of this, the local bank of that, you know, look for that, go in, develop a relationship with it. And I've talked to several people even within the last couple of months that have done that, develop small community bank relationships. You won't believe the feedback that you'll get from them and how willing they are to work with you.
Yeah,
So
thanks, Tony.
Thank you. I have a question. Like, how does the interest rate look for you? Do they charge more than, you know, what you would get in a conventional loan, or?
No, well, at least when
or they actually get charged lower because you are cross collateralized?
Well, there's a couple things. First off, I never worried about the interest rates. I mean, clearly, if it was 3% versus 13%, I worried about it. But to me, it was more about access to the cash, access to the long-term financing. A lot of times, real estate investors tend to be very focused on interest rate as a very key metric. And I say that the key metric is terms rather than interest rate standalone. So no, our mortgages were all at the normal rates. But I got to tell you, even if they were percent or two more, that was fine with me because it was access to the cash, very easy to work with, and I could certainly go above the threshold limits because they wrote their own paper and held the mortgages. But to answer your question, the mortgage rates were comparable, but that wasn't my metric. My metric was access to the cash.
Yep.
Can you explain more to access to the cash? Because you are still generating the same amount of rent, and then if your mortgage rate is comparable, you're still paying bank, the same interest plus principal, right? So what is the access to cash you were talking
So
about?
what I mean, let's say, for example, let's say in your example, you said you may or may not be stuck at 10 mortgages because of the rules, whatever those rules are. And let's say you're stuck now, but you have some deals coming up, and you can, and let's say the interest rate now is about 2 3/4 or maybe even 3%. But a small community bank says, hey, we'll lend you money for 15 more homes, but we're going to charge you not 3%, but 3.5% or 4%. Would you do it then? If you could go ahead and then double your portfolio for 1% more of interest rate. And we each have to make that decision. But in my view, and when my wife and I were talking about this, we wanted to expand. And so again, the access to the cash, the ability to be able to go above the limits because the bank would hold their own paper. If we had to even pay another 0.5% or percent, we would do that so we could expand our portfolio rather than being stuck in, let's say in your example, at 10. That's what I mean by access to the cash.
Oh, okay, I got it. And then I guess another related question is, I just feel real estate is so high right now. I started buying only 3 or 4 years ago, and I just felt like I'm only looking at a neighborhood because I don't want to deal with eviction. I mean, ideally I don't want to, and I hope my tenants don't, give me a trouble over that. But if I look at the A neighborhood, I think if I can find cash flow or break even, it's a good buy. I just can't, I feel that I've seen, of course, I only look at Redfin, Zillow, things that are on market, but I just cannot find anything that's, a deal. Because I think the internet makes property so accessible. Unless I'm doing the strategy that Mike was talking about, doing direct mail, access to the properties that the owners are not really thinking about selling at the moment, I just feel I cannot find deal if I'm focusing on the A market.
So I think one of the things that we get hung up on is what we consider a deal. What is it? Tony's got a strategy that he writes all these offers when he's in a buying mode. He'll write 100 offers a week in order to buy maybe 2 deals a month, right? But what's your strategy? If you went and you pulled the tax records in a specific area that you wanted to be in, and you found all of the out-of-state owners. So how do you find an out-of-state owner? Well, if you got a property at 123 ABC Street and the tax bill's being mailed to Florida, that's an out-of-state owner, right?
Uh-huh.
So those, start a mail campaign with out-of-state owners. Now, you might not get immediate results, but 6 months down the road, 12 months down the road, there might be all kinds of deals. I'm a real proponent that you can make money in a high real estate market and a low real estate market. Carl will laugh about this because I used this this morning on something else we were doing, but I said, there's 2 times in life to plant a tree, right? You could have planted one 20 years ago or plant one today. And when you look at appreciation on a property, appreciation organically goes up on an annual basis. If the economy is improving 3% a year, that's typically what you're going to see your appreciation go up in real estate. If you own a piece of real estate for 10 years, it's going to go up in value, even if you bought it at a high rate today. Now, let's be realistic about that, though. If you buy it way too high, yes, of course. But if you buy it at market level, and if it's overpriced, it's not going to sell generally. So if you buy a property at market level, it's going to go up over time. It just, it's a natural cause and effect. It's part of supply and demand, right? From a typical economic standpoint.
Okay. Yeah, that makes
So,
sense.
and Vicky, here's the thing, right? There's deals out there. We just have to look a lot. We have to look enough. You build that network. You have people bring you deals. If you're very specific about the market, you talked about, hey, I want to be in an A-class market is what I heard you say. So if you're buying an A product in an A-class market with the hopes that somebody who lives in the property never goes in financial difficulty, that's your strategy, right? So there's nothing wrong with that. You're just going to pay a little bit more of a premium for that product. Like I bought a B-class product, market rate rent B-class product in a, C area, C plus area. So the area was a little less, but the product was a little bit more, and I could push the rents because of that. So there's ways to look at how your strategy works for you. And if your strategy is an A product in an A market, and you don't get to buy as much as your brother who's buying a lower class product in a lower class market, you're still getting a superior product, right? So.
Okay, can I ask one more question?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so what do you think of Seattle? Like, because I actually have all my investments in Seattle. I just randomly got into it because I was living in New York at that point, and then I have family in Seattle, and then I realized Seattle is so much cheaper than San Francisco, and then like people in Seattle actually make very good income, and there's no state income tax, so I always thought that's a good market. But like I saw in your list it's not there, and then you listed like places like Atlanta.
Right.
And I get like San Francisco. I think San Francisco is a great market, but it's so expensive, right? Like even the local people there cannot afford a primary residence. Like, so so I want to get your take on Atlanta and Seattle.
So Atlanta, for a multifamily standpoint right now, is probably one of the hottest markets in the country. That list that I showed was a list from early in 2020. It got published by, I want to say Marcus Millichap put it out, and then I compared those results to what happened, what Real Analytics put out. So like I said, 3 of those 5 markets have been top market year after year: Dallas, Atlanta, San Francisco. Here's what I know about Seattle. One of my good friends is a broker in Seattle, and it's a tight market. It's a very extremely fast and hot market, and has been for years. He likes to buy infill stuff in downtown, and found a property a couple years ago. I'll never forget. He found this property downtown a couple years ago that he could do an infill project on, and was just elated because they're hard to find, right, in Seattle. Depending on what product class you're in, and I don't know that much about multifamily in Seattle. I know the residential market is really hot there. And you're right, it's not as expensive as San Francisco. I don't necessarily like the northern west coast, but that's a personal preference. I like the Southwest. So if you looked at a map from Raleigh to Dallas, they kind of call that the smile of the United States. That's the market I like. But everybody has their own preference. So, Tony's in Detroit, and there's people that like the New York market. So it depends on what your appetite is. So, I don't know if that helps or not. If you want real market statistics, though, I know a great broker in Seattle. I can get you his information if you want it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I definitely want to start looking into multifamily because I think that's just much more efficient. But I have zero experience in that. That's all.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Mike, can I jump in just for a second?
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, it's interesting while I'm listening. It's like I've only done multifamily. I was a banker before, and I could definitely appreciate what Tony was saying earlier. When you go into a bank or a credit union or a community bank, remember what's most important to the banker. It's deposits. That's what drives their business. So, when you walk in there and say, listen, you don't want to say, listen, I am looking for a loan. You want to say, I'm looking for a small bank that's going to work with me that can manage my deposits, right? Because then you're changing the conversation and their ears will perk up, right? So that's, one thing I just wanted to point out. And, the other thing was when I got into multifamily, I didn't really know what I was doing either. And I made a lot of mistakes. And, if I would have had someone like Mike or an experienced guy to show me where the potholes were and the black holes and the red flags, it would have made a huge difference for me because I rushed into it. I bought an 18-unit building, and I would have been much better off waiting another 6 months or 9 months and really analyzing more deals. And, when Tony talked about putting contracts, remember, when you put a contract on a piece of property, you control that property. You don't own it, but you control it. And that's really, really important. That seller can't do anything with that property while you control it under that contract. So, I would have been much better off in taking my time, listening to some mentors that could have helped me, and putting multiple offers instead of just being myopic and focused, on that one property. And Mike, before I go, you don't want to forget to mention the call this Thursday.
Oh, yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Go ahead. Go ahead. You can talk about that.
Well, for those of you that don't know, Mike and I are having a call on Thursday. It's a call about an hour and 15, hour and a half conversation about mindset and about multifamily for people, that may not be in the industry right now, but are looking at getting into the industry and really want to learn from a couple of guys who've been doing it for a long time. All the way up to people that have experience, or someone like Tony that maybe have experience in single family homes, but they want to make that turn. They want to turn the corner and get into multifamilies and maybe 1031, 10 single family homes into a 20-unit apartment building. So, it's a great opportunity to have a conversation. No cost free opportunity to have a Zoom call with a couple of guys that really understand the multifamily space and can point you in some directions. So I don't know, Mike, you want to share that link, or I don't know how you would do that.
Yeah, Vicky, if you want information, just drop your email in the chat box, and I'll send you an invitation for it. Ali, I think you already know about that, right? And Tony, you do too?
Yeah, I do. I'm going to register. Okay,
great. Yeah, so, one of the things too, Vicky, you kind of mentioned, you need some help, you need some direction. I'd be willing to schedule a call with you to see if maybe coaching might be right for you. I find that sometimes people go into coaching a little bit, they get a little bit of direction and guidance, and it just kind of propels them and helps them to go now where they want to go. I've spent, a lot of years in coaching and training myself. So if you wanted to go that route, we could spend a little time and kind of maybe help you discern a little bit better about what you have and what you want to accomplish and why you want to do that. So, I think it's interesting that you own as much real estate as you own in such a short period of time. I think that's awesome. And, not many people do that. So my hat's off to you. I think you've done a great job so far. Anyone else have any other comments or?
Yeah, I didn't get to see the list of the markets that Vicky was talking about, but what other locations do you recommend besides Atlanta and Dallas?
Houston was on that list. San Francisco was on that list, and San Jose, believe it or not, was on that list. But that's San Jose's really tech market. So.
Any cities in Arizona?
You know what? I just read something this week that Phoenix was, pretty hot market. Phoenix has been one of those markets though that's been pretty well established and pretty hot for many years. So it's always, you know, accessible and available. So, and I guess, you know, the other question I would ask Aaliyah is what product? So single family or small multifamily or larger multifamily, you know, I think the product is going to make you or be a distinguishing factor as well.
So for instance, with Houston, which property type would you recommend?
The list that I put up was multifamily. Okay.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah. So the list I put up was multifamily. And so those markets that were on that list were, you know, multifamily markets.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. I wasn't
Yep.
sure if you were also mentioning like single family homes.
Yeah, no, yeah. Well, and you're in Chicago, aren't you, Aaliyah?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, yeah, I thought you were in this market. So, you know, the one thing, here's the thing that I like about the urban market in Chicago is that there are so many 2 to 4 unit properties. And for somebody new, and I know you, Aaliyah, we've kind of alluded to this conversation with you a little bit, for somebody new to go into the multifamily space, it's a great opportunity in Chicago's urban market to get experience, get your feet wet with everything from acquisition and due diligence to the closing to renting and operations and management. And, you know, 2, 3 of those buildings, you get your feet wet, you start to see now how you can go to the next level after a couple of those. And it's a pretty interesting progression. So I don't think you could be in a better market right now, really. All right, great. Well, Tony, any last comments tonight or?
No, Mike, nothing on this end. I appreciate the information you gave. It was great as always.
Yeah, good, good. I'm glad you were here, Tony. It was good. Obviously, some of your knowledge came in helpful tonight, so that was a good thing. Carl, how about yourself?
No, Mike, just thanks for doing this and you know, giving back. You know, you and I have known each other a long time. I always kid with you and say you've forgotten what most people have learned yet. So, you know, I just really appreciate that you do this. You know, and again, I just wish you were around 30 years ago when I bought that first property, because I probably would have done a lot better with it. So just keep up the good work.
Thanks, Carl. I appreciate that. You're always so kind. Vicky, Aaliyah, any last questions?
Oh, yes. For multifamily, I think you must have a property manager, right? Because it's just too much work. I feel like I cannot manage a multifamily, even if it's just 3 or 4 units by myself.
You'd be surprised what you can do. I was in the property management business. I had a company, we managed 10,000 units at one time in 5 different markets around the country. I left that company. I went into and opened a small residential company, which I built up to manage about 125 scattered site single family properties, and sold that company, and it's still in operation today. So the answer to your question is, what's your strategy, Vicky? If we can uncover your strategy and get crystal clear on what your why is and where you want to go, what the destination is, we can help you get there. So, you know, it might make sense for you not to manage. You said you're an attorney. If you're still practicing, you're probably busy. So yeah, for somebody else to manage your property and for you to get a report once a week, that might make sense for you. Especially if you're building a portfolio, because that'll free your time up to go and look at other property and to do more acquisitions, right?
I want to be very funny. I'm actually a real estate lawyer.
Oh, okay.
I do commercial stuff. So when I went to buy these condos, I didn't realize it's so cost inefficient. You know, like like the first loan I got, I think I paid lender fees. You know, I didn't know any of these. I just went on with whoever my broker recommended.
Yeah.
Like when I look at the closing statement, I was like, wow, I didn't realize the closing cost is so high. And then like at one point I was looking into Atlanta, but I know nothing about Atlanta. And the agent there was like, oh yeah, I can help you manage, you know. And then I was like, what's your fee like? He's like, well, one month rent goes to me. And then on top of that, you pay, I think it's 8% property management fee. And then I was like, okay, if I add your fee, there's like negative return to this investment, you know? So like, I think that's a struggle I have. Like, I feel the transactional cost is very high in real estate, especially if you do smaller scale.
Yeah, well, you know, I would have advised you from the beginning to not do condos. So, you know, let me be the bearer of that bad news right out of the gate, right? So, um, I feel that, listen, I knew one of the biggest condo builders in the city of Chicago, built thousands of units back in the 90s when that whole condo boom was going on. And he got done and he was done and out. And I saw people bust out in 2005, 2007 because of the condos. And we actually bought a couple of deals that were, you know, condo buildings that they couldn't sell the condos, and we reconverted them to apartment complexes. So that market is a funny market, and you got to buy really right in that market.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
give you
I'm done with condo. I'm like either moving to townhome or single family, hopefully multifamily. I just don't want to pay condo association fee anymore. It just
Yeah.
doesn't make sense.
Vicky, can you tell me your experience with condos? Because I was actually considering investing in them.
I think it's very easy. It's super, super easy to manage because, well, again, like the property I bought was pretty new. It's like around 10 years old. So there's almost no maintenance problem for the 3 years I owned it. And then the location were very good because they are in like right downtown Seattle, very close to Amazon. So there's no vacancy at all. But I think the downside is the HOA is very expensive. So that, like, you know, instead of building your equity, you are paying like a third party a lot. The upside is easy to manage, I would say.
Yeah. So here's the problem with the HOAs too, is you don't have any control over that. And if something goes wrong and they need additional monies, they're going to raise your HOA or put an assessment on you, right?
Oh yeah. I think luckily I've only got one assessment just for the roof, and it wasn't too expensive. But I see what you are saying. It's sort of like you have a third party controlling whatever, you know.
So the issue becomes now all of a sudden, if you are tight in a tight cash flow situation, then they put an assessment on you or raise the HOA. Now your tightness got even tighter, or you know, you're in a negative cash flow position now. So that's one of the problems with condos. Townhouses could be a little bit better, but listen, I'm an advocate of small multifamily because you can buy 2 to 4 unit deals, residential deals. And Aaliyah, you know, we talked about this, but that first deal you could do FHA financing, pay less money or put less down, ease of acquisition. You get in, you get your feet wet. You live in the building, you have a couple other tenants that live in the building, and you start to build up that equity. You know, the whole philosophy behind this, and my philosophy that I work with people on, is this: you want to build short-term cash flow and long-term wealth, and you want your cash flow to be accessible and not so tight that you're squeezed out of the market.
Yeah, I agree. I like the way you put that.
So how do we build that strategy? And I know you and I are talking tomorrow, so
Mm-hmm.
we can talk on that a little bit more too. So,
Yeah, for sure.
all right, Vicky, hope that was helpful. I will send you an
Yeah, it's
email.
extremely helpful. Yeah, it's I mean, I've been to 2 real estate seminars. I feel like those are very dramatic, I would say. This is much more down to earth advice.
Okay, good. And here's what I'll do. I'll send you an email with the invitation for Thursday. It's just a online virtual event. Carl and I are going to basically, have a real estate discussion. And then, after that, you send me an email if you want, and we can set a time up and you and I can jump on the phone for an hour or so.
Sure, sure. I will do the Thursday thing. If you can send me the event.
Okay, perfect. Well, listen, everybody, I'm glad you were here tonight. It's been interesting. Tonight was a good conversation. I know that these Monday nights sometimes are better than others, and this just happened to be one of the good ones. So glad you guys were here, and you really some good questions made it interesting. So remember that we meet every other Monday for the multifamily mastermind. And the other Mondays we meet for property management mastermind. So Vicky, that might be good for you too, to come to the property management stuff.
Okay. Yeah. I'm trying to educate myself
Yep.
as much as I can
Yeah.
before I make things like going by a condo, that kind of mistake.
Right. So, all right. Well, you guys have a great evening, and I look forward to talking to everybody soon. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.